I adored Georgetown. Obviously, it was so grateful to them for giving me a scholarship that allowed me to go to any college. And if I was going to write a novel where these things take place, one, it could not possibly be something like Salem, Massachusetts, for God's sake. It had to be now, the real world. It's the busy, bustling, modern streets of Georgetown. And secondly, I didn't have to do a lot of research about the environs. I knew them so intimately.
I don't think the story would be anywhere near as effective if it was set in Los Angeles. With everything else going on that went on in the story, Georgetown, the university, the church, the tradition, the old buildings, the flight of steps next to a house which appeared dangerous and where later something horrendous happens. All of these are little visual pieces of a larger puzzle that when you start to explore them, they begin to add up in the audience's subconscious and create the mood of the film.
Most movies are a combination of set and locations, and The Exorcist was a wonderful combination and appropriately done. Our location scout did an amazing job finding those locations because the places in Georgetown, for example, were beautiful.
As you look at Georgetown from across the Potomac River, as we do in the first shot of Georgetown, we look at it from a place called Roslyn, Virginia, which is right across the Potomac. And you see Georgetown across the Potomac, you see a couple of spires, and you see a dark building, which is a portion of the university at one end. And it appears from that aspect and in a gray morning light to look like a kind of prison or forbidding place. And over at the other end of the frame, the camera starts to move away from that forbidding image on the left into a flight of stairs and a house that appears to be next to that long flight of steps.
A lot of people may or may not realize they built an extension onto that house. They needed that in order to bring the room close to the stairs so when the body comes out, the stuntman comes down. Billy Friedkin had me there the night that they did the stunt fall down the stairs. All those stairs were padded with just the smallest amount of padding. This guy just jumped out and rolled down all those hundreds of stairs that have become so famous. People bring me pictures of the stairs to sign. That's how famous those stairs are. People travel around the world to see those stairs. And they're only, I mean, they're literally not wide at all.
That's what we want. That's exactly what we want.
Filming around Georgetown was as rich an environment to photograph as the Iraqi desert. The campus itself is a Jesuit campus, and so there is an air of religiosity about it, where there is a tradition of Catholic belief and teaching, which is inherent in the very structure of the buildings themselves as you get closer, and in the hallways and in the chapel and everywhere that we film. Everything that appears in front of the camera is suggestive of a kind of religiosity and a belief that is going to hang over the entire film. The whole town sort of revolves around Georgetown University.
And we had other locations in Manhattan that were terrific.
You're helping all overboard.
Father Karras, waiting for the subway in New York, was set there by Blatty, and so I shot there. Blatty set Father Karras's visit to his mother somewhere in Manhattan, and we picked a street to shoot there.
Mama?
The mother's apartment was in that building. It wasn't a set.
The mother's house was tricky to shoot in because that was all live, and the hospital and the asylum. So we had our share of moving around. And we shot the interiors of The Exorcist on the old Fox stages on 54th Street and 10th Avenue in Manhattan. They're no longer there, but they had 2 big stages and utilized the whole place. The only thing that was done in that studio, to my recollection, was maybe some other little bits and pieces and the interior of the house.
The house we used in Georgetown for the exterior, the rooms were much too small to light and film. So I knew in order to achieve the kind of movement I had to achieve, I built a 3-story house, for all intents and purposes, as a practical house in New York City. I did that because, A, I didn't want to be too close to Hollywood, and also we had shot so much in Georgetown and New York, I felt that the set ought to be built on the East Coast, or we would have had to have 2 crews.
It's the power. Hold it.
Blatty set the opening in Iraq, so I went to Iraq. And that was the last thing we filmed. Everyone told me there's no way you'd ever be able to film in Iraq, because even then, the U.S. had no diplomatic relations with Iraq. Through Jack Valenti, who was head of the Motion Picture Association at the time, and a good friend, I was able to contact the Iraqi embassy to the United Nations, and I met with the ambassador. And I told him what I wanted to do, never thinking he'd allow us to go to Iraq and film. And they imposed certain conditions, but they invited us over. So all of this archaeological history and magic was right at my fingertips when I shot that opening prologue. I felt in many ways, when I made the film, like a landscape painter. And I was very conscious of approaching the Exorcist film in that way, with a kind of painter's eye, all of which was provided for by Blatty in his screenplay. I mean, I didn't invent any of this, but he had given me a roadmap and a place in which to make shots like this. And when I saw it, it took my breath away.